The town of Boya was alive with excitement. February 25th had arrived, the eve of the legendary Mount Cameroon Race of Hope, a tradition that had drawn runners from across the nation and beyond. The air burst with anticipation and the streets were filled with athletes stretching, vendors selling roasted plantains, and spectators placing their bets on who would conquer the chariots of the gods first. But while the runners prepared physically, the bakweri elders were preparing for something far important, the ritual of appeasement. Deep in the heart of the forest, at the base of Mount Fako, away from the festivities, a secret ritual was taking place. The bakweri people, the mountain's ancient guardians, gathered in silence around a massive stone altar, their torches flickering in the night. At the head of the ceremony stood Chief Mokake, his face stern with reverence and fear. Around him, the elders chanted in low rhythmic voices their incantations meant to honor Epasamoto, the spirit of the mountain, an ancient force both feared and respected. Before them, 10 cows stood tied to wooden posts, their eyes wide with unspoken terror. The animals were an offering meant to ensure the mountain would not claim any soul during the race. This must be done perfectly, Chief Mukake warned, his deep voice barely above a whisper. If we fail, if anything goes wrong, the runners will not return. The crowd murmured their agreement. They knew the stories of those who had run up the mountain and never came back. The first cow was led forward. An elder Fonyonga raised his ceremonial blade, the moonlight glinting off its surface. Just as he was about to bring it down, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. Everyone froze. The jungle fell silent. Chief Mukake turned sharply. Who is there? The torches flickered, casting eerie shadows on the trees. No one answered. After a long pause, Elder Fonyonga continued and the ritual proceeded. But none of them noticed the shadows slinking away through the trees, moving swiftly and silently towards the secret feast that had been laid out for Epasamoto. A thief, a fool, a man who did not believe. A mile away, near a hidden grove at the base of the mountain, Kome, a desperate young man, crouched in the darkness. His stomach growled as he eyed the grand spread of food meant for the spirit. A lavish array of roasted yams, smoked fish, plantain dripping with palm oil, and kola nuts arranged in sacred patterns. Kome licked his lips. Epasamoto does not need all this, he muttered to himself. He is just a story. He grabbed a piece of roasted fish and devoured it hungrily. Encouraged by the lack of divine punishment, he stuffed a handful of plantains into his sachet, then bit into a kola nut. A sudden gust of wind howled through the trees. The flames of the torches flickered wildly, threatening to die. Kome hesitated. The jungle felt wrong, as if something ancient had awakened. But hunger and greed pushed his fear aside. He gathered as much food as he could carry and ran back towards the village, never once looking back. Behind him, the jungle watched. February 26th arrived with the crisp morning air filled with excitement and tension. Thousands of spectators crowded the Moliko Stadium, eagerly awaiting the beginning of the Mount Cameroon Race of Hope. Vendors shouted, selling roasted maize, bottled palm wine, and cold water. A band played bakweri traditional music, drumming a rhythm that sent energy through the crowd. Among the athletes was Emmanuel Atangana, a seasoned runner known for his discipline and faith. He adjusted his running shoes, stretching while quietly reciting a prayer. Though he was prepared physically, something in the air felt off. A weight sat on his chest, an unshakable sense of dread. At the grandstand, Chief Mokake and the elders watched. None of them knew about the stolen offering, but deep in their bones they sensed a disturbance. The race officials stepped forward, and the announcer's voice boomed across the field. Runners, take your positions. The athletes lined up. The referee raised his pistol. On your mark, get set, go. A loud bang sent the runners surging forward. The crowd cheered as they sped off, heading towards the towering slopes of Mount Fako. But as the runners disappeared into the thickening mist, the mountain grew silent. Something waited, something hungry. The runners reached Hut 1, the first checkpoint. Volunteers handed out water as the athletes pushed on. Then, blood-curdling screams tore through the air. Head turned, one of the runners, Samuel Ngole, had stopped dead in his tracks, staring wide eyes into the forest. "What is this?" another runner asked. Samuel opened his mouth to speak, but his body lurched forward, yanked into the trees with unnatural force. Silence. The runners froze, staring at the dark space where he had just stood. His water bottle rolled onto the ground, spinning to a spot. The officials radioed in. "We have a runner missing at Hut 1. Repeat, a runner missing." Samuel was never found. As the remaining runners climbed higher, unease crept through them. They pushed towards Hut 2, the second checkpoint, but the mist thickened, coiling around them like ghostly fingers. One by one, more runners disappeared. First, a young woman named Manka. She was running beside another athlete when she gasped suddenly. He turned only to find empty space where she had been. Then two more athletes vanished, their last words swallowed by the wind. The radio buzzed frantically. "We have multiple runners missing. We need immediate assistance." But no one would come. The mountain had decided Epasamoto was angry. At Hut 3, the final checkpoint before the summit, only a handful of runners remained, including Emmanuel Atangana. He gripped the cross around his neck, whispering fervent prayers. "Father, protect me." A deep rumbling shook the earth. The wind roared, the trees bent, and from the swirling mist a shape emerged. A monstrous shadow loomed, molten eyes burning like fire, its form shifting like smoke and darkness. A low, guttural growl filled the air, vibrating through the ground. The remaining runners screamed, turning to flee. It didn't matter. One by one they vanished, swallowed by the mist, all except Emmanuel. He ran, his feet pounding the dirt, heart racing. His breath came in raged gasp as he descended the mountain, passing the checkpoints where dozens had vanished. He did not stop until he reached the stadium. The crowd had expected victorious runners. Instead, they got a single survivor, wide-eyed, shaking, and whispering one chilling phrase: "They are all gone, all of them." The air in Boya was thick with dread. News of the missing runners had spread like wildfire, and panic had begun to settle over the town. Families of the athletes gathered at the stadium, demanding answers, but none were given. The race officials, the bakweri elders, and even the government authorities stood in grim silence, unable to explain what had happened. In the midst of it all, Emmanuel Atangana, the lone survivor, sat on the ground near the medical tent, his hands gripping a wooden cross tightly. His eyes were vacant as though his soul had been left behind on the mountain. His body trembled, sweat soaked through the running gear, and despite the beat of the sun, he felt ice cold. Chief Mokake knelt beside him. "Son, you must tell us what happened up there. Where are the others?" Emmanuel's lips quivered. His voice came out in hoarse whisper. "The mountain. It took them. A murmur spread through the gathered elders. Some exchanged knowing glances, others gripped their staff tighter. Epasamoto has been angered. Elder Fongyonga muttered. The sacrifice was tainted. He exclaimed what was his. The chief's face hardened. We must act fast before more are taken. Later that afternoon, a rescue team was assembled. Armed with rifles, torches, and hunting dogs, they prepared to ascend Mount Fako in search of the missing runners. Leading the group was Sergeant Iwane, a hardened officer who had spent years patrolling the forest regions of Cameroon. He did not believe in spirits or curses. "We will find them," he assured the worried families. "No mountain can just swallow people. There is an explanation." Yet as they started their climb, an unnatural stillness enveloped them. The usual calls of birds and monkeys had vanished. The only sound was the crunch of their boots against the rocky terrain. The first checkpoint Hut 1 was eerily empty. The bottles of water left for the runners were still lined up untouched. A few running beeps lay scattered on the ground as though their wearers had simply vanished. Sergeant Ewane picked one up. "This is fresh. They were just here." One of the hunters, Mola Reby, touched the ground and frowned. No footprints leading away. If they ran off, there would be tracks. This is something else. The air grew heavier as they moved towards Hut 2. The mist thickened and the path became narrower. The deeper they ventured, the stronger the feeling of being watched became. Then a low growl echoed through the mist. The hunting dogs whined their tails, tucking between their legs. One refused to move forward, growling at the empty air. Sergeant Ewane motioned for silence. His grip on his rifle tightened. "Stay alert." The mist swirled unnaturally, shapes moving within it. Shadows darted in the corner of their eyes but disappeared when they turned to look. Then one of the rescuers screamed. All eyes snapped to Tabe, the youngest member of the team. His body convulsed, his eyes rolling back as he clutched his throat, gasping for air. "Tabe, what is wrong?" Ewane shouted. But before anyone could react, Tabe yanked into the fog. Gunshots rang out as the men fired blindly to the mist. The sound echoed through the mountain, but when the smoke cleared, Tabe was gone. Not a single trace of him remained. Panic set in. "We have to go back," one of the hunters yelled, his voice cracking with fear. "This is not a normal search. This is a curse." Sergeant Ewane gritted his teeth. "No one is leaving until we find those runners." But before another step could be taken, the ground rumbled. The trees bent unnaturally, their branches twisting as though trying to flee. The air smelled of burnt earth and sulfur. Then from the mist they saw it. A hulking figure loomed, its eyes glowing like molten lava. Its form shifted between solid and smoke, its limbs long and cloud. A low guttural glow reverberated through the ground, shaking them to their bones. It was Epasamoto. One of the men fired his rifle, but the bullet passed through the creature as if through air. A chilling laugh echoed. Ewane turned. "Fall back now!" The men ran, but one by one they were taken. The mist swallowed them whole. Their screams were cut short, leaving behind only the echo of the wind. By the time Ewane reached the base of the mountain, only 2 of the original 15 remained. They stumbled back into Boya, their face pale with terror. The town had waited for news, but when they heard what had happened, only one thing was certain: Epasamoto's wrath was just beginning. The survivors of the failed rescue mission stumbled in Boya, their faces gaunt and drained of color. A terrified hush fell over the crowd that had gathered near the stadium. Mothers clutched their children tighter, elders exchanged wary glances, and whispers of Epasamoto's curse spread like wildfire. Sergeant Ewane collapsed near the entrance to the stadium, gasping for breath. His uniform was torn, stained with dirt and something darker, something unnatural. His wide eyes darted back and forth, seeing horrors that were no longer there but had burnt themselves into his soul. Emmanuel Atangana, the lone runner who had survived, watched from distance. He knew that look, the look of a man who had seen the other side and barely made it back. Chief Mukake stepped forward, his voice grave. "Tell us what you saw. What happened up there?" Ewane wiped sweat from his brow, his hands trembling. "The mountain, it's alive. We never stood a chance. They were taken one by one into the mist. We fired, we ran, but it didn't matter." A murmur swept through the crowd. "Epasamoto is angry," whispered one of the elders. "We must leave the mountain alone," another muttered. But the chief raised his hand for silence. "We cannot run from this. We must find a way to appease him before more lives are lost." The elders huddled together, whispering amongst themselves. Finally, Elder Fonyonga, the wisest among them, spoke. "A cleansing ritual must be done. A greater sacrifice is needed." Meanwhile, deep in the heart of Boya, Nico Abena, a local journalist, was piecing together the misery. He had heard rumors of Epasamoto before, stories whispered in hushed tones, warnings given to children, but this was different. This was real. Nico sat in his small office, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating his face. Articles and reports were scattered across his desk, accounts of disappearances, old bakweri legends, testimonies from the past survivors of Mount Fako's wrath. There was a pattern. Every time something went wrong with the sacrificial ritual, strange disappearances followed. But this time, it was worse. The anger of Epasamoto had never been this relentless. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he compiled everything he had. He had to get the truth out. But just as he was about to publish his findings, his screen flickered. The lights in his office dimmed. A shadow loomed behind him. A chilling voice, hollow and echoing, whispered his name. Nico spun around, heart pounding. The room was empty, but the temperature had dropped. The air smelled of sulfur and decay. His fingers trembled over the keyboard. Was it possible that even speaking of Epasamoto was enough to summon its presence? A single notification popped up on his screen, an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "You are next." Back at the village square, the bakweri elders gathered around the roaring fire. The smell of burning herbs filled the air as they prepared for a cleansing ceremony. The people of Boya watched in uneasy silence as the elders chanted in the ancient bakweri tongue, calling upon the spirits to intercede. A young man, Kalengole, was chosen for the sacrifice. He was a direct descendant of the first bakweri hunters who had once fought against Epasamoto centuries ago. If anyone could make peace with the spirit, it was him. Kale stood bravely before the flames, his heart pounding. He knew what was at stake. As the elders painted sacred symbols on his chest with white ash, he clenched his fist, ready to face whatever awaited on the mountain. "You must climb alone," Elder Fonyonga instructed. "Offer yourself to Epasamoto. If your heart is pure, he may show mercy. If not..." He did not finish the sentence. The village watched in solemn silence as Kale began his ascent into the darkness. The night was merciless. As Kale climbed higher, the wind howled like the cries of the lost souls. The mist grew thicker, wrapping around him like ghostly hands. Every step felt heavier, as if the mountain itself resisted his presence. Somewhere above, a whispering voice called his name. He stopped, his breath forming in short, rage clouds. Epasamoto, he whispered, I come in peace. The wind stopped. Silence. Then, a pair of glowing red eyes opened in the mist before him. A deep guttural voice rumbled through the mountain. You dare return? Kale fell to his knees, bowing his head. Great spirit of the mountain, we have wronged you. Tell me how to make this right. The air grew unbearably hot. The ground beneath him trembled. The blood debt must be paid. Epasamoto glowed. A greater sacrifice is required. Kale swallowed hard. What do you mean? The shadow around him began to swell. He saw visions, flashes of the past. The stolen sacrifice, the angered spirit, the runners being dragged into the mist, the failed rescue team. Then, one final image, a great fire consuming the town of Boyo. Kale gasped, No, please, there must be another way. The red eyes narrowed. There is. Bring me the one who defied my offering, the one who stole from me. Deliver them before the next moon, or the land will burn. Kale's blood ran cold, but I don't know who. The wind howled again, drowning out his words. The mist thickened, and when it finally cleared, Kale was back at the base of the mountain. The elders and villagers rushed to him. What did Epasamoto say? Kale's voice trembled. We have until the next full moon. If we do not find the thief, Boya will burn. A terrified silence settled over the town. The true hunt had begun. The village was plunged into chaos. The weight of Kalengole's words pressed down on the people of Boya like a thick frock. A sacrifice had been stolen, and now Epasamoto's wrath threatened to consume them all. If the true culprit was not found, the entire town would burn unto the curse of the mountain spirit. Chief Mokake stood at the center of the village square, his face carved with worry. His voice, though steady, carried an unmistakable edge of fear. We must find the thief. If we do not, the spirit will take vengeance on us all. The elders gathered once more, murmuring prayers under their breath. Some of the younger men, hot with anger and fear, demanded immediate action. We must search every home, one man shouted. Whoever stole from Epasamoto has doomed us all, another cried. The crowd grew restless. Suspicion spread like wildfire. Neighbors eyed each other with distrust, old rivalries reigniting under the pressure of the fear and desperation. Kale, still shaking from his encounter, stepped forward. This is not the way, he said. Epasamoto does not want blind accusation, he wants justice. But his words fell on deaf ears. As the sun set over Boya, the once peaceful town became a place of paranoia and whispers. Doors were shut tight, families huddled together. The prayers to forgotten gods filled the air. The search had begun. Groups of men moved from house to house, inspecting every corner for the stolen offering. Then a discovery was made. In a small hut near the market, an old woman named Mamandongo was found clutching a bundle wrapped in cloth. Her wrinkled hands trembled as the villagers tore the bundle from her grasp. The moment they unwrapped it, gasps ripped through the crowd. It was the remains of a sacrifice, pieces of meat, bones and dried blood hidden away like a dark secret.
Please subscribe to watch more of our videos. Thank you.